Hi, everyone. I am Diana Bird. I am a neuro-emotional coach. And today I wanted to share some more information about emotions, how to work with emotions, what they need, and what they're trying to communicate. So earlier this week, I sent you an email about survival brain and how when we are not used to or don't know how to really be with our emotions, when we struggle to be with anger or fear or despair or loneliness, it can push us into survival. Then I sent you an email about how to come out of survival. So I gave you 2 exercises. Now, there's a lot more amazing information that I can share around survival and emotions. But what I wanted to do with this really quick little series is just give you some tips that you can use now, today, that will help you get you on the path of being able to work with your emotions and work with whatever brain state you find yourself in with more confidence, more clarity, more calm, and to know what to do, because it's so often overwhelming when we fly into a rage, like an uncontrollable rage or an uncontrollable panic, and we don't know what to do, right? So the way that I see things as a neuroemotional coach, the lens that I'm looking through is that we have 3 key brain states. We have our survival brain, which is in charge of making sure we survive. It runs a lot of the systems of the body. It's in charge if there's an emergency, and it gets activated so it can help us, get out of emergency situations. Very useful part of the brain, but for many of us, we've kind of been badly wired to end up in survival when there is an emergency state. Then the second part of the kind of key brain state is our emotional brain. And that's the part of our brain where we are generating emotions. All kinds of emotions, and all emotions are normal. Love, joy, excitement, fear, despair, loneliness. All emotions are normal. They're all have a purpose and a reason for being there, which is part of the work that I do, is helping people see what their emotions are trying to communicate. And then we have our executive brain, which is the part of the brain that if we all had a choice, we'd be like, I want to stay in that part, because our executive brain is like when everything comes together. Like we're calm, we feel confident, we feel like naturally like, yes, ideas, we have energy, we like people, we like ourselves. We're really good in this brain state of making excellent choices, making excellent long-term plans. And it's really the only brain state we want to be in when we have to make decisions, because it has this much wider awareness of ourselves, who we are, and what we want for our lives. But the challenge for most of us in the way that we were parented and how our parents were parented is we tend to exist in this loop between survival and emotional brains, and very rarely end up in our executive brains, which is such a shame, because it's the natural place where we are, we feel awesome. We want to really be in that brain state as much as we can. Now, we're never going to always be in that brain state, because emotions are a very significant part of being human, and they help us have connections and relationships. They make life a much more kind of deep, interconnected, loving experience. So we are meant to experience emotions. We also want to make sure that survival brain stays online too, because if there is an emergency, we want that brain state. We want to be able to do things like, lift up car if there was a problem, or, swim 2 kilometers if a shark bit us. We want to have these incredible survival skills when there actually is an emergency. So the work that I'm doing with clients and through my courses and things that I talk about in my newsletter is really about how we can rewire our responses so we have a much more free and confident ability to move between the brain states and not get stuck in survival, not get stuck in our emotions, that we can allow them to be their natural flow that they're meant to be without getting overwhelmed by anger or overwhelmed by fear, and it may really inhibiting our life, so we don't get to that fun part of executive brain on a regular enough basis. So today I'd really like to share a very kind of basic understanding of emotions, and I'd love to just share a story about an emotional experience in the hope that it kind of gives you some illuminating ideas about how to work with your own emotions and give you something to get started with straight away. So the key thing to know about emotions is they want to be seen, they want to be felt, and they want to be heard. So what often happens when emotions arise is we look, the emotions that are activated within us and they're activated within our body, but we look for outside circumstances to decide this is the cause or the blame. Now we have outside stimuli does activate our emotions, but it's not the 100% cause. So the emotions that we experience, especially the really big intense emotions, if it's a kind of big one, usually is a very old historical emotion that just keeps coming up because it really wants to be seen, it really wants to be processed, it wants to come out of us, but because we don't know how to deal with it, it comes up and we keep pushing it back in, comes up, keep pushing it back in. So say, for example, my husband says something to me and anger activates. And this is, I'm not going to lie, happens. So the anger activates and I think, what's wrong with him? Like the way that I've learned to deal with emotion, naturally, I just want to blame him. He's made me so angry. How dare he? What's wrong with him? I hate him. All these thoughts are spinning around my mind. And sometimes out of my mouth, in the past, out of my mouth. But when we actually learn about emotions, when I can take it, now what I do is maybe if he says something and anger activates, I'm like, oh, I feel anger. Okay. Now it feels a lot in my body. So I'm going to presume that this is probably some old historical anger on top of, it's like a cup, you have a bit of anger, something happens when you're very young, doesn't get dealt with. So you have more, you get a bit more, you get a bit more, you get a bit more. And all of a sudden your cup is over, it's full of emotion and it just overflows. So what we want to do is we want to recognize, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing a lot of anger. And we're not immediately going to that outside stimuli and saying, it's all your fault. How dare you? We want to disconnect from that desire to blame outside circumstances. because the anger has arisen for a reason. All of the uncomfortable emotions that we have are unmet needs. They are trying to communicate with us that there is a need here that we have. Me, Diana, I have a need that's not being met. So I disconnect. I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave my husband for the moment. Maybe there's things we need to discuss, but I'm definitely not going to discuss it when I'm so angry. That's not going to go well. I mean, we all know that the more emotional you are, and the more you try and talk to somebody when you're really emotional, most of the time the conversation is just going to get out of hand. It's not going to go the way you want. Their emotions get activated. Then you're just throwing emotions at each other. So you're like, okay, so I'm feeling a lot of anger. Now, what we want to do is we want to, I mean, our thoughts are going, aren't they? They're like crazy going, this is happening, this is happening, he's at fault, da, da, da. We want to just like, we're never going to stop our thoughts, but we want to just be, okay, we're having some thoughts. I'm just going to let that exist. Now, how does my body feel? And this is where it can feel really unusual, because we're not used to focusing on where the feeling is showing up in our body. But the only way to process the feeling is to go into the body, to go into the feeling, pay attention to it. So we're seeing it. I have anger. We're feeling it. I feel anger, and we're staying with it. So how this might show up is, okay, I'm noticing some anger. It feels like this huge fire in my body, and it's so uncomfortable. I often, when I have anger, I often have this sensation of like a bull in a china shop, and it's like this mad energy racing around my body, and I just want to, you know, I feel so uncomfortable. And what I encourage a lot, especially with something like anger, the energy so much is you can do something physical if you feel like it. You can punch a pillow. We have these little balls in our house that my kids can squeeze, you know, because there's that, I want to get this feeling out of my body. It's horrible. Stomping, like that's something we do. You know, people can, there's a room that you can just go to and just stomp if you want to. Some people are more physical than others. I don't tend to do a huge amount of physical things, but some people really like that physicality. What I often do is just like try and shake it out of my body. I'm like, oh, you know, shaking that energy and just allowing that anger to move through you. And this is what we want to remember. There's a really lovely quote from the guy who wrote The Presence Process. I've forgotten his name all of a sudden. He's amazing. And he says, the only way out is through. So when he's talking about emotions, the only way to really have some release with your emotions and integration is to go through them. And we don't do that generally. Most of us are trying to suppress them or distract ourselves or talk ourselves out of it. That's really common. Oh, I shouldn't be angry, or, you know, intellectualize it in some way, or vent. You know, I could, if I'm angry with my husband, just go and shout at him, and that will make me feel a little bit better, you know, short term, but it's not going to solve the problem or actually do anything about the anger that's in my body. You know, in fact, if I shout at somebody and then they shout back, you know, then the anger can just escalate. So we want to think about releasing the feeling, being with the feeling, allowing it to be there. So we sit, yeah, you can move. And every feeling has a different type of quality. You know, when I'm feeling fear, I don't want to move. You know, I might want to get really cozy and I want to make myself feel really safe and get a nice blanket and just like, oh, and maybe talk to it. Like I love talking to my emotions. I don't, you know, this is really uncomfortable. You know, I might talk to myself. This is really like, you know, painful, but I'm going to stay with myself while I feel this. And like rub your chest. I'm always rubbing my chest. Give yourself a little bit of comfort while you're feeling that feeling. And eventually what will happen is that feeling will release. Now, it often happens in one go, but sometimes if it's very old, if you're not used to feeling your feelings, if you're not used to sitting with them in that way, it can be something that you have to keep revisiting. Or with some feelings, they just are so big that you're not going to sit with them all. Anger can be, you know, if you're not used to being with anger, and it took me a long time to really feel comfortable with anger. You know, it's like you kind of sit with it as much as you feel you're able, and then you stop and you carry on doing other things, and you come back to it when you feel, you check in with your body. Do I feel like I could feel a little bit more anger now? Yes, no. And this is also where our survival exercises can really support us. Because when we're not used to feeling emotions, they can feel quite overwhelming. So say I'm sitting with anger and it starts to feel too much, then I might do some regulating breaths. And if you didn't watch the last video, I'd encourage you to go back and have a look, and it will give you these 2 really good survival exercises. But it's also like a sign to your brain, you know what, we're safe. I can be with this anger, I can hold it. So just to recap, emotions want to be seen, they want to be felt, and they want to be heard. So the seeing is recognizing, I am having an emotion. The feeling is dropping into your body. Oh, what does this feel like? The emotion is showing up in my body. And the hearing is often, they will communicate something. When we spend more time working with our emotions and releasing them, they will often communicate with us. And what I've learned from working with anger over the years is anger often arises for me when I feel unheard, when I feel that my needs aren't being considered, when I actually made a video about this a little while ago, when my husband said something, and to me, I got, you know, this wash of anger. And then as I stayed with the anger, and it took some time, like at that point, it was like an evening, and then, you know, it was kind of processing overnight. And then in the morning, it was like a fire that was started out really big, and then it just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I realized that what he had said, I don't even remember what he said, but what he had said, when it all kind of came down, the anger fizzled out. I had this idea that he was thinking about space for other people in the family and himself, but he was not thinking about the space that I needed, you know, because I work at home, he works at home most of the time. So it was this kind of feeling of being unheard, unseen, unconsidered, which is not a word, unconsidered. And that's what it was trying to communicate. The anger really wanted me to say, no, that's not a good plan. Have you thought about what I need? You know, okay, that's it. That's what it wanted to say. But because of how I've learned to deal with emotions, often I won't just say something like that. I won't consider my needs first and foremost. I won't say, okay, well, that's an idea, but I want this and I want this, you know? And when we have that discomfort about communicating our needs, emotions will come in and be like, right, come on, pay attention, communicate your needs. That's where anger really, really shows up for me. And so everybody has different experiences with emotion. Everybody's emotions are trying to communicate different things. But the journey that is so wonderful is when we really start working with our emotions, when we really start to be able to hold them in our body, to process them, we learn that they are just trying to help us be fully expressed, be connected, have great relationships, but also great boundaries. They want to help us stay safe, be protected, learn how to communicate what our needs are, meet our own needs. And when we learn to really read them, we can then anticipate, okay, I often have anger when I feel unheard and unseen. So that's a need of mine to be heard and seen. I'm going to work on that. And then the anger doesn't need to show up to kind of get me to pay attention and do something different. Does that make sense? So I love this work because it's all about changing how we respond to emotion, learning to feel deeply safe in our nervous system so that we don't get pushed into survival brain all the time, to learn how to really be with our emotions so that they can help guide us to live these extraordinary lives that we really want to live, where we feel not confined, that we're not just trying to get by, but we're actually expanded, that we can do the things that we love, we can be with the people we love, we can communicate and not get blown off course because, you know, one of our children are upset, or someone's sent a complaint, you know, from like our boss is upset with us, or our partner is struggling. You know, we're disentangling ourselves from other people's emotional situations and learning how to really support ourselves and support the other people in our lives if that's what we, you know, really want to do as well. So it's very simple, deep work. And I've given you a little taste in these last 3 emails of the types of things that I do and how I do it. If you have any questions, I would really, really love to hear them. I love answering questions. And this work really comes to life when there's like a specific situation, you know, when I talk about, you know, when I connect it to things that happen to me. On my courses, we spend a lot of time connecting it to individual situations that the people in the group are experiencing. You know, what should I say to my partner when this happens and I get really upset? How should I talk to my teenager when they're, you know, not talking to me? And how can I reach them? What do I do when a client gets really angry with me? You know, all of these real life situations, we can bring this work and we can change how we show up, how we feel, and that changes how other people around us show up and how they feel. So thank you so much for watching my video. As I said, any questions, let me know, hit reply, and I will be sending out another email tomorrow. Lots of love.